I'll turn my microphone on. Good evening, everybody. So, oh, look, we have a nice bit of reverb there. It is the Cabinet meeting, and I'm just checking the date. It is the 10th of February. So, welcome, everybody. We have got a really packed agenda this evening, and well done for anybody who's managed to get all the way through the 536 pages. But you do have an advantage as Cabinet because you've presented all of these overview and scrutiny, so you know these pages really well. But to those watching online and who've joined us tonight, thank you for being with us. As I say, we've got a busy agenda to work our way through, but we'll try and make sure that we have enough time to discuss everything in sufficient detail. So, do we have any apologies this evening?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Howell.
Thank you. And we've had the minutes from our meeting on the 20th of January. These have already been circulated. Does anybody have any comments or amendments? And if not, can I have a show of hands if you're happy that I sign them as a true record of the meeting? All those in favour? Okay, thank you. We will sign those as a true record of the meeting. I'm just going to initial it now because otherwise I shall go home and realise I haven't initialed everything correctly. That page there. Thank you very much. All done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the next item tonight is members' interest. Does anybody have a declaration that is disclosable, pecuniary or other registrable or non-registrable interest? Councillor Ferguson.
This is a fun one as a new Green Party member. With respect to agenda item 6, I am employed by and I'm a shareholder in one of the largest engine manufacturers in the world. I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, they're not involved in the sort of fleet or transportation vehicles that we're involved with, but I just thought I'd say that anyway.
So we'll just take advice from the monitoring officer just to check that she's content.
Thank you. I would request some further detail. It's difficult for me to advise if you're not clear on whether or not.
So my employer is Caterpillar, and they largely make static engines for industrial purposes, although it's not impossible that one of them might have found their way in some sort of truck or waste vehicle over the years, but it's not a key part of their business. And I'm an engineer and not involved with the commercial side of the business.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson, could you advise if you, in your work role, are in a position to influence in that respect?
I am absolutely. I'm involved in engine design. I have no influence over commercial matters at all.
Okay, thank you. On that basis, I'm content for you to remain. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Nobody else got anything to declare, in which case I'm going to move us on to item 3. So this is quite a significantly chunky item. It is the 2025-26 revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy, excuse me, which also includes the capital programme. And you'll find this on pages 9 to 224. Councillor Mickleborough, I'm handing across to you.
You may be pleased to hear that I'm not going to read out all 222 pages this evening, otherwise we might be here till Christmas. Sorry, we had a feedback loop which just wanted to make sure was going to continue. Okay, so the core message this evening is that we have produced another boring, balanced, robust HDC budget. It is a budget where planned expenditure is matched by income without using any reserves, and it prepares the ground for the major transition to a unitary local government structure in 2028. This has been achieved despite significant economic pressures. These include inflation, that has dropped since the peak as Russia invaded Ukraine, but remains high compared to the previous decade. We also see higher interest rates continue because of the Bank of England's attempt to counter that inflation. The result of this instability means pressure on prices, including energy and construction costs. And these factors, as well as an increased demand for services from residents experiencing financial pressures, continue to impact on our finances through what are described as unavoidable cost pressures. This year's MTFS covers a shorter time horizon of 1 budget year and 3 MTFS years, where historically HDC has produced a 4-year MTFS. HDC will cease to exist in 2 years' time, so the extra work required to produce a 5th year is unnecessary work for the team. There was a discussion about producing a 2-year MTFS. However, it was considered that with a number of capital projects in flight, we bridge the gap to the new unitary better with a 4th year, as this will allow MRP, or minimum revenue provision, generated by the suggested capital programme to be illustrated for our successor authority. For those not used to public sector finances, minimum revenue provision could be considered to be similar to depreciation in commercial finances. The provisional local government settlement arrived just before Christmas and introduced a 3-year settlement, providing more forward certainty than the 1-year arrangements used since 2016. It is difficult to understate the positive change this brings to strategic planning, and it is long overdue. With that settlement comes the new fair funding reforms. These have removed the remoteness factor and placed a greater emphasis on deprivation, shifting funding away from Shire District and towards urban authorities. There has also been a move away from ad hoc and short-term grants. For example, we have seen the final New Homes bonus payment, and these continue the theme of placing a greater emphasis on funding through assessed need. The changes introduce greater forward certainty, but also increase our exposure to redistribution and baseline resets, reinforcing the need for prudent financial planning. To protect frontline services, the budget sets a Band D council tax rate of £170.86, a £5 a year or 3.01% increase. Inflation is currently higher than this at 3.4%. Breaking down some of the key items in the budget. Total revenue expenditure has increased by £2.661 million, or around 10%, compared to the original budget. The MTFS assumes a notional 5% increase in staffing costs to account for pay awards and the national living wage increase. A significant unavoidable pressure of £1.3 million is forecast for waste processing costs related to the materials recycling facility contract. To balance the budget, £3.959 million is proposed in combined savings and new income generation across various portfolios. Notably, this budget does not yet include changes to parking charges, as a new parking strategy is due for completion in spring 2026. The government has confirmed that the current 2-tier system of district and county councils will be replaced by new unitary authorities in April 2028 in a local government reorganisation process. This transition creates material uncertainty, and consequently, the council has added £3 million to its LGR reserve, bringing the total to £4 million to cover one-off costs like ICT integration and workforce transitions, while also remembering that we must try to prevent LGR excessively delaying local projects. Despite the reorganisation, full council has asked the government to allow the May 2026 local elections to proceed to ensure residents maintain a voice during the transition. The capital programme introduces and includes a number of new projects that invest up to £29.2 million into the district. Projects include £9 million for the Huntingdon Health and Sports Hub, £2.4 million for vehicle fleet replacement, 1.4 million for the One Leisure St Ives outdoor pitch, another 1.4 million for the Hinchinbrook Country Park enhanced scheme. We, as Cabinet, have also approved a regeneration partnership to deliver over 300 homes and new commercial spaces in market towns, supported by a Regeneration Opportunities Reserve. The commercial investment strategy portfolio is set against a very challenging property market, but remains a hedge against inflation and variable government settlements, and the portfolio provided a gross yield of 6.53% last year. The portfolio is not anticipated to recover to previous levels of revenue return in the year ahead, while LGR makes implementing outputs from the new commercial investment strategy challenging. To conclude, the Section 151 officer has officially endorsed the budget as robust and the reserves as adequate. The medium-term financial strategy shows that, leading into LGR, HTC is in a strong financial position that means we are able to support the transition to a new structure. It places us in a more secure position than many other local authorities and means we are better equipped to deal with future pressures if or when they may arise. Covering some of the comments from overview and scrutiny. There was a question from Councillor Jennings around the proposed 5% salary increase and his comparison with some private sector trends and where inflation is and what pay rises look like elsewhere, which was very adequately answered by Councillor Davenport-Ray. There was a question around how much of the revenue support grant was actually dedicated towards the food waste costs. The answer to which was that we were not given a split as to the numbers. Everything was placed together. It was interesting, actually, there was a call with the Minister this morning going through the local government settlement where that point was actually raised and civil servants didn't answer the question. Councillor Jennings asked a question around the £3 million allocated for local government reorganisation, and which was followed up then with a further question asking just generally around earmarked reserves. The answer to that was that Sandra is, as soon as the budget process has completed, looking into the detail of earmarked reserves and the impact those have or what they may be used for, with a slightly different perspective forced onto us through local government organisation. There was a question around the financial impact of planning fees, which was answered by Mike. There was a comment that perhaps the MTFS should cover the standard 5 years, 4+1, rather than the reduced year that we have put into place. It is worth noting that the finance team are put under significant pressure by the lateness of the settlement coming through just before Christmas, and that the team this year as well has a number of new faces, which has made it a little bit more challenging for them. But there was also a couple of typos that came across into the report that was published. Unfortunately, a couple of those, there was one particular table that was talking about the value of the commercial investment strategy, where it seemed that turning it into a PDF had moved all the numbers across by a column and some had dropped out, which I'd missed because I was looking at the original Word document. But unfortunately, I think, I'm not sure it's been corrected for cabinets, but it would have been correct, or certainly will be corrected for full council. There were a couple of other simple spelling mistakes here and there, which again have been picked up and corrected. Unfortunately, when you have a document of this sort of size, even the best spell checker doesn't necessarily help you. There's an interesting question about dogs and rats fees. And there's also a question talking about the biggest risk. So our Section 151 officer was asked what was considered to be the biggest risk, and that was around the any changes actually potentially in the final settlement, which I think we've managed to avoid. So I will open up the table to questions and anything particular that Section 151 officer can help with if it becomes too financially technical for myself.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough. Obviously, we as the Cabinet previously are aware of all the work that's been gone on, and a number of us watched overview and scrutiny and were present. But are there any questions that people would like to ask, or any comments people would like to share? No. Oh, Councillor Wakeford, you're going to help me out.
Thank you, Chair. I think that summary is really helpful from our portfolio holder. As you alluded to, Chair, this is not the first time we've seen the budget. We've been intimately involved in developing it. So lest residents are watching and raising an eyebrow at what may be the brevity of this item, I think for me the real value is the opportunity to reflect upon the consideration and questions from scrutiny. Obviously hadn't seen it prior to us presenting it to them, and we've been walked through that. I don't know if Councillor Davenport-Ray might like to say a couple of things in terms of unpacking the answer around staff salaries. There's obviously technical points underpinning that, but I think the sort of big picture is that we need to make sure that we are retaining staff in this challenging period as we approach reorganisation, and I think that is extremely well justified on a commercial basis for us as a council to be making sure that we're not doing less than the budget envisages. Otherwise, the only element I might comment on is around the length of the medium-term financial strategy. I mean, I hear there were questions around that at scrutiny. I think as was set out clearly, though, in the context of local government reorganisation, which it is the clear position of government is going to happen, and that is the working assumption of all of us in local government. I think it would be, I think the pragmatic judgment we've made that on balance, rather than wasting time coming up with an extra year that's mostly speculative and guessing anyway, what we've put before us is more robust than is legally required, and I think is absolutely appropriate to our circumstances. So I'm quite content with the decision we've made on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Davenport-Ray, seeing as you've been named, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, scrutiny correctly identified that our staff are our largest demand on our revenue every year, and reasonably so. For 2026-27, we've budgeted for a 5% increase on staff salaries. Now, that's a budget because we're part of the national pay negotiations on that, and so we won't know the actual number until later. But I think that's prudent, 5%. The specific point in the budget that one of our councillors asked about was called a pay rectification, and it's underneath the finance line, although it will be spread across all of our departments. This has to do with our lowest paid staff, who I think it's really important that we treat with equity and respond to their questions that they've given us about their inability to be recognized when they have outstanding performance in a particular year. Because of the way that our pay increases have worked in the past, at their lowest levels of pay, there are no increments in order to be able to compensate them for their really hard work on exceptional work. So this rectification is about how the pay spine works and making sure that we action that request from our staff that's come through from the workforce strategy. On the pay increases, I think it's also important to remember the history behind that. And we're sort of running to catch up with something that our staff have experienced. So if we look back from 2010, 0% pay increase, 2011, 0%, 2012, 0%, 2013, 2%, 2014, 0, 2015, 1. This goes on. And in some years, the only pay increase being simply to reflect the fact that we were no longer paying minimum wage, which I find particularly troubling. So I'm really glad that we've started off on this course of getting us back into correctly compensating our lowest paid staff, especially, and also making sure that we stay competitive with our peers as a council. I hope that answers Councillor Wakefield's questions.
Extremely helpful. Thank you. And I felt giving visibility to that tonight was probably of use to us.
Thank you to both of you, because again, we've sat in these meetings, we've had these discussions, but not everybody joining us tonight would have necessarily watched Overview and Scrutiny, so I'm really grateful. I just want to put on record my thanks to Overview and Scrutiny. I know there's been a lot of work done over a long period of time to try and really encourage them to get underneath the detail, and I really felt that they were really doing some of that detailed analysis and thinking, which was incredibly welcome. Are there any other comments? Because if not, I'm then going to, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I have a question for Councillor McBorough. I'm wondering if you can give us some perspective on the budget that's before us and some of our peers around the region. How should we be feeling about this? How do we measure up to what's going on in the whole atmosphere of local government at the moment?
Councillor McBorough.
So I've been concentrating so hard on our budget that I've not really lifted my head to look too closely to those around us. However, there were some interesting comments on the call with the Minister this morning where it's fair to say that there are some challenges out there. If I were to take a guess, I'd say we're probably somewhere in the top 25% of district councils in terms of where our finances sit and the budget that we're able to put forward. I think that ability to have a little bit of confidence behind what we're doing has made option E possible. I don't think a lot of the work that's happened over the last couple of years in terms of the confidence that we've had to go out to talk to our peers, to talk with industry about what a great place Huntingdonshire is, and then to have the confidence to propose option E would have been possible if we were in a position where staff were overworked, unable to get through a day, having to let things drop. Now, that's not to say that we don't have staff who are extremely busy, but they are extremely busy doing productive, constructive work. They're not busy putting out fires that are created because they are woefully under-resourced or understaffed. And all of that, I think, has contributed to that confidence. And in comparison, perhaps, to some peers, puts us in a better place.
Thank you, Councillor McBorough. If there are no other comments, then, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I suppose the other reflection that might be worthwhile on the scrutiny discussion is that certainly, as I understood it, I was able to attend for most of the meeting, and I've reviewed what we've got before us, summarising comments from them as well. It certainly doesn't sound like there were showstoppers they identified. It certainly doesn't sound like there were any fundamental holes that they identified or poked. It certainly doesn't sound like there were alternative suggestions made on anything we're setting out. I think there was a specific difference of view around whether we should include the MTFS for an extra year again, which we've spoken to, and we're content with where we're at. So I think while we are unlikely to have a quick full council discussion when we reach that, I think this is as reassuring a scrutinising process of the budget as we might have hoped for. Again, I share your thanks to them for that work.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Yes, and Councillor Mickleborough is going to make a return.
When I took this portfolio on, one of the things that I said is that I think it's more important with the finance portfolio to realise that you're keeping the seat warm for the next person who'll take it, because finance is sort of like turning the oil tanker. If your bins aren't collected for 6 weeks, everybody notices. Once the bins start being collected again, everybody notices. It's really, it's quite quick to see the impacts things have. I think finance is possibly second only to planning in the length of time that it takes for things to actually come out in the wash. So as I look back to 4 years ago and think of that point of what you want to do is to pass on the finances to the next portfolio holder in a better position than you found them. And I think just as an administration, you should surely, your baseline should be that you pass the council to the next administration in a better situation than you inherited it in. And I think on the finance side of things, while you might not agree necessarily, or other people might not agree with some of the political decisions made, on every single aspect, bar the commercial investment strategy, this council passes the finances across to the next administration in a better place. And I think that's a record we should be proud of.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough, and I think that's really important. And we've talked in this chamber a number of times around things like our 20 to 30 year vision and the fact that we are custodians as an administration, because actually it's about what comes next. And actually there's never been a more important time to hand things on, because we will have local government reorganisation. And I won't be forgiven if I don't mention option E at least once tonight, because I have promised I will do that many times. But it should mean that whatever comes next, obviously our preference is E, but we will hopefully leave it then with very good financial footings to go forward. And I don't think every administration will necessarily be in such a fortunate place. So thank you very much for presenting the papers. I'm going to move us then to the recommendations. There are a lot of them, so just bear with me. These are on page 10. So the first lot is directly for Cabinet. So you'll see at the top of the page, Cabinet is recommended to approve the updated fees and charges for 2026-27 as set out in Annex B1 and B2. And then to note the proposals for the setting of future parking charges and proposals within the main body of the report. So I'm going to ignore the note because we can note that, but I am going to ask for a proposer for the approval of the updated fees and charges. Councillor Mickleborough is going to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Can I have a show of all those in favour?
Want to use the voting?
Oh, we're going to use the voting system. We can use the voting system. Would you like to please pick your colour? Green is you vote for it, amber is you vote against it, and red is you abstain.
Red is against.
Oh, red is against and yellow is abstain. Sorry, I should know by now. We have voted. Oh, is it me? Have I voted? You've got 8.
There should be only 8.
So we've got 8 votes and everybody has voted for it. Thank you very much. Well done for managing the new system. So that's approved. And then the next set of recommendations are for us to recommend to council that they then approve. So I'm going to take those as a block, if I may, the recommendations are set out on page 10, that you are going to now, I'm going to ask if you will vote to recommend all of those to go forward to council so that they can then make their approval process of the budget. So can I have a show for a proposer? Councillor Mickleborough, seconder, Councillor Harvey. With your magic buttons, all those in favour, please press green. If you are not in favour, it's amber. No, it's red if you're not in favour, and it's amber if you're abstaining. See, look, it's on the screen before I've even finished. Perfect. We have all voted for it. Thank you very much, colleagues. I will get the hang of it, honestly. I need to get the hang of it before we have it in full council, because then it will be slightly more exciting. Thank you very much, Councillor Mickleborough. That was a very detailed report. Can I put on record our thanks to officers who have gone above and beyond, and particularly in tight timescales at a time of the year when actually most would be quite rightfully enjoying a little bit of a break over the Christmas period, and when I know that people have also been contending with the usual bouts of not being particularly well. So a huge thank you to officers. And Councillor Mickleborough, thank you very much. As always, very clearly presented so that those of us who are trying to get to grips with the volume of paperwork can understand clearly what we're trying to achieve. Thank you for that. But Councillor Mickleborough, you don't get off the hook quite yet, because you're now going to introduce item 4, which is the skills the SIL governance phase 2 strategic allocations.
So, Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL, is a charge made by HDC on new housing developments and is used to fund the infrastructure needed to support growth. The report in front of us introduces phase 2 of our governance review, aimed at making HDC more agile in how we spend this money. The primary driver for this change is the upcoming local government reorganisation. As we previously mentioned, on April 1st, 2028, Huntingdonshire District Council will cease to exist as it transitions into a new unitary authority. We want to ensure that the £38 million currently unallocated in the SIL pot is allocated to benefit Huntingdonshire residents now, rather than being absorbed and redistributed by a future authority. The proposal introduces 2 complementary ways to manage SIL funds in addition to the current provisions for parish and town councils. First is strategic allocation via the Strategic Priority Programme. This creates a transparent annual pipeline of large-scale projects. These are projects that serve more than just a local area, such as new schools, major roads, or regional leisure facilities. The second is a council capital programme integration. This allows SIL to be used more flexible for HDC's own projects. By using SIL instead of borrowing, we can avoid high interest rates, currently around the 6% mark, saving significant public money. This proposal also ensures we don't lose focus on 4 key areas: accelerated infrastructure delivery, protection of local funding, delivering enhanced facilities, and placing a focus on health and the environment. Accelerated infrastructure delivery is the forward funding of projects. The example in the report is the Godmanchester Doctor Surgery expansion. The surgery was a local exemplar of this new approach, where HDC forward fund the expansion. This meant that the surgery could be built ahead of time, ahead of the houses on the development being built, and therefore could accommodate patients immediately. But the money was repaid by developers later as those houses completed. This diffuses the often heard problem of facilities being available only after all the local residents have moved in, and therefore creating a reduction in facilities for existing residents. Protection of local funding means that there will be no change to the meaningful proportion of SIL given directly to town and parish councils. A minimum balance of between £3 and £5 million will always be retained to support smaller local community projects. Enhanced facilities means our residents can expect continued investment in district-wide assets. Past examples of SIL-funded projects include the Ramsey 3G Bridge, improvements to Hinchinbrook Country Park, and town centre upgrades in St Neots. The health and environment focus ensures that new governance prioritises projects that support positive health outcomes and address climate change through sustainable growth. All SIL spending will continue to be published annually in an infrastructure funding statement, allowing residents to see exactly where the money is going. The new approach will be implemented immediately it is approved and remain in place until the 31st of December 2028. This timeframe provides a stable transition period as we move towards the new unitary structure, ensuring Huntingdonshire's development funds are working for its residents today. Looking at the comments coming from overview and scrutiny. Councillor Martin asked what the decision-making process for the proposal would entail. He questioned the purpose of the new plan in comparison with the existing arrangements and why the current approach could not continue. It's an interesting question, this one. I do remember on our first couple of meetings when we discussed SIL allocation that we, because of the way that the rules were set, we ended up turning down things that we wanted to approve because the rules wouldn't allow us to approve them. I remember we went round the first round of trying to improve that and the same applications came to us, but we were then able to allocate money to. I think some people have short memories as to a number of things that had not really been inherited that were fit for purpose or that didn't necessarily act in residents' best interests. And over the 4 years of our administration, I think we have slowly picked off the majority of those to be able to deliver things that act more appropriately for residents. And I think that the SIL governance side of things is one of those. And I think that the amendments here certainly, again, take that step forward for us in the improvement side again. There were then a couple of questions just around the impact that local government reorganisation would have and whether it's possible to ring fence any of the funds as we move into the unitary. That's an interesting question that has been raised and a point that's been made by other people as well. And I think it's a lovely idea to be able to, and we may well be able to write some form of agreement that tries to contractually bind that. But as I am reminded by senior officers, this administration cannot bind another. And all that administration would need to do would be, within its own constitution, to change or to make a new decision and to overturn whatever it is that we have done. As a result, it would be prudent to consider putting in place new governance that will allow us to make awards with HDC funded money or money that has come from development within Huntingdonshire and apply that back to residents for schemes within our area. There was another question asking around the option of passing SIL funds to town councils. And I think that that's an interesting idea, but it's certainly one that would need to be looked at and considered within the realms of the rules around SIL and the processes that we already have in place. That's the majority of all the key questions that have come from overview and scrutiny. So I open the microphone to other questions.
Councillor Ferguson's quick off the mark and then Councillor Sanderson.
So I have got comments. I've also just been made aware by a member of the public who's trying to watch the meeting that we're not streaming online at the moment. Not sure if that's an issue or not. So can we just check that because there is public interest in this item and all the items. But I would also like to register to speak, Chair, when we're ready.
Okay, we'll just check whether the live stream is in fact doing what we're expecting. Sometimes it's because they seek to... So if anybody is watching at this point in time, we're just pausing to just try and resolve whether everything is live streaming in the way we were expecting it to. So if you're watching us online, please just bear with us if you can hear us. We're just checking to make sure that the feed is live. So if you can see us and you can hear us, we're just checking at our end to make sure that you are actually able to see and hear us. So please, would you just bear with us a moment? So I'm just going to take advice because it would appear that the live stream is not recording or not showing in the way that we're expecting. We may adjourn shortly. Trying to watch us on live stream. As soon as we were made aware in the chamber that the live stream wasn't actually going out live, we've stopped the business so that we could actually then address the issues. We believe those are now addressed. And I'm just checking, I'm getting a nod from our technical team. So we will resume the item. So, oh, hang on a minute, I've got the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the benefit of those watching at home, I have been advised that a recording took place for the earlier part of the meeting, so please be advised that the intention is to publish and broadcast that element. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So apologies for those of you who've been watching and a little bemused as to why you couldn't see us. We thought we were still broadcasting, but you will be able to watch this back. So we had just finished the comments around overview and scrutiny. We were then moving into the SIL governance discussion, and I was waiting for Councillor Ferguson when he alerted us to the fact we didn't have live streaming, and then he was going to come in with the questions. So I'm going to Councillor Ferguson, then I'm going to Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment. I think Councillor Mickelberg alluded to this, although you might not have heard it, that when we inherited this, one of the big frustrations when we were first appointed to Cabinet was trying to deal with the previous SIL policy. It was also a frustration from outside when I was town council, trying to decode how we got access, our communities could access the money that was being raised through development and growth in their areas. I think that frustration went on for a few years, and I think, and as Councillor Mickelberg put out, sometimes we had to make difficult decisions, sometimes we had to change decisions later on. I think we pushed quite hard for a quicker resolution to this, but I think with hindsight, it's good that we've taken the time, because I think this is a policy which is a much more robust way of distributing the money and better meets our strategic purposes than what we had before. So I think a lot of work's gone to this, and I'm very glad to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Sanderson.
Am I on? Thank you, Chair. I thought Councillor Mickelberg reported this item really well, and the comments made at scrutiny. I do recall, though, Councillor Martin suggested that there was some sort of two-tier system we were creating, which of course is not the case, because any project, whether it's from HDC or from somebody else, would still have to go through the same process, which is quite robust. And the point about towns and parish councils is, of course, if they have a local, neighbourhood plan, they'll get their meaningful proportion of 25% of SIL. But what I would encourage them to do, and you and I, Chair, have sat on the panel looking at recommendations for projects up to £100,000, is just encourage towns and parishes to engage early and go through the process with our officer team. It would save a lot of time, because there are projects, unfortunately, that aren't often suitable for SIL. But as the report says, it's about forward funding, clever use of SIL funds, which we've started doing in some cases already, or we'll be doing. I think will be very beneficial to our residents and to our finances.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson, and thank you for the reminder that we have an officer team there to help and support applicants, and it is available to them. Councillor Wakes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Mickelberg alluded to, the particular suggestion floated in the meeting about whether we could hand SIL monies sort of wholesale to town and parish councils. It isn't a lawful suggestion. We need to satisfy ourselves that money is being spent in ways that meet the legal requirements for strategic SIL, for the district level SIL. There are different rules that apply to town and parish councils. But as Councillor Sanderson has quite rightly said, the way we do support our town and parish councils is really important in this process, and helping steer them through accessing the district SIL, as well as utilising their own to the extent that they have some, and as Councillor Sanderson rightly said, I'd underline they can ensure that they receive a higher proportion of SIL if they agree a neighbourhood plan, and many of our town and parish areas have neighbourhood plans, many don't currently. Otherwise, the note of questions from scrutiny reflect a couple of our opposition members querying, as Councillor Mickelberg identified, that the two-tier criticism, asking, why are we doing this? Why is the status quo not sufficient? And then also asking why we weren't doing something to ensure that SIL money is best used for Huntingdonshire in the context of impending reorganisation. And my reflection sitting in the gallery that evening, as it is tonight, is that I think they were answering each other's questions. There is something that we can do to ensure that we make best use of our SIL for the things that matter to us and our district and our residents, and it is through doing what the paper proposes. We can't apply any sort of arbitrary rules and deadlines on the money, or seek to stop it passing across in the event of reorganisation. But what we can do is make sure that the money is being used for its intended purpose as effectively as possible, and perhaps more swiftly than HDC has always managed in the past. And this is what the policy sets out. And I think it's entirely right and proper, not evidence of some sort of two-tier approach, that we as a district council, in line with our strategic priorities that we set on behalf of our residents, for us to say there are things that are really important that we can prioritise, and that we make sure we've got a SIL allocation policy that enables us to funnel those without the repeated going back to applications as facts change. So I think it's a good challenge around how we make sure we're making best use of the money for our residents, but it's met by the paper that we've got before us, which Councillor Ferguson next to me, I'm extremely pleased has been brought through, and pleased to support tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Mickelberg, and then I'm going to move to the recommendations.
I've been reminded that there was a question which isn't on our list. It was asking around how much money would we have saved as an organisation if we'd have implemented the change to the SIL policy sooner. It's a slightly circular question though, because we've not engaged in any external borrowing. Therefore, we couldn't have avoided external borrowing costs because we then didn't do any external borrowing. I'm not quite sure why that question wasn't on the overview and scrutiny list, however, but it's just come to mind for completeness.
Thank you for that clarity. It did rather puzzle me on the evening, so I'm pleased that we've got an answer for that. Thank you. We have a long number of recommendations in front of us which are set out on pages 226 and 227. So I'm going to work through them in order. The first recommendation is to note the paper, so I'm going to move swiftly on and assume that you've noted it. The second is, so I'm going to take these on block, but I'm going to read them all first, just so everybody's clear. The second is to agree the approach to the strategic allocation of SIL funds. The third is to agree the suggested approach in respect of the use and assignment of SIL funding. The fourth is to agree to retain the minimum level of SIL funding of 3 to 5 million. The fifth is to note. The 6th is then to delegate to officers, and the 7th is to delegate as set out in detail. I'm not going to read them all because otherwise the meeting will be a very, very long meeting, but hopefully that's relatively clear. So you are being asked to propose items 2, 3, 4, 6 and 7 on the recommendations. Councillor Mickleborough, can I look to you to propose them? Who would like to second them for me? Councillor Sanderson, thank you very much. Can I have, are we going to vote? We're going to go to voting. I will get the hang of it. In which case, Cabinet, please would you cast your votes? We have the magic number, therefore we have all those in favour. Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Mickleborough, because that was a lot of things that you were walking us through. You now have a moment to rest your voice for a moment, because Councillor Ferguson, we're going to hand across to you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're talking about lettings policy, aren't we? Yes. This report brings forward changes to the Council's letting policy that are legally required, but they're also rooted in our commitment to social justice and our responsibility to people in crisis. The lettings policy is the Council's statutory allocation scheme, which governs access to housing register and the allocation of social rented homes. In July 2025, legislation and statutory guidance were amended with immediate effect by the Secretary of State. Those changes removed local connections and residency requirements from care leavers under 25 and for victims of domestic abuse. These are mandatory changes and are not a matter of local discretions. Our officers implement them immediately through management instructions to ensure the compliance and to avoid disadvantaging people at moments of acute vulnerability. So this report formalises those changes in the published policy and provides clarity where eligibility has widened. However, it also clarifies how care leavers are funded by Cambridgeshire, how the care leavers funded by Cambridgeshire County Council or Cambridgeshire are prioritised compared with care leavers funded by other authorities. So you might remember at our October council meeting, a resident called Kerry Portman asked a question about whether this council would recognise being a care leaver as a protected characteristic, and that's something we couldn't do in the time available to this council, but I think that the council in general supported the principle of, certainly by giving her a round of applause. I've asked Kerry's permission to talk about her tonight, but Kerry told a very staggering story of her experience as a care leaver of homelessness, mental health struggles, and also suicide attempts. And in her speech, she had some staggering and quite upsetting statistics. She told us that 25% of England's homeless population are care experienced, and a third of care leavers become homeless within the first 2 years after leaving care. Care experienced people are 360% more likely to die prematurely and more likely to die of unnatural causes such as violent death, suicide and accidents. And 45% of looked after children have mental illness, while care experienced people are 4 to 5 times more likely to attempt suicide into adulthood. So this really is, in terms of our commitment to people in crisis, these are some of the people who struggle most in life and deserve our support. So this absolutely reflects our corporate parenting responsibilities while maintaining fair and lawful access to all eligible applicants. It also removes barriers for people in crisis when stability matters most. This report recommends approval of the amended policy, and it also recommends delegated authority for minor future statutory updates, which I'll come back to in a second. So the comments of ONS were unanimously in support of the policy change. It's difficult not to, I think. In particular, Councillor Bywater, who has campaigned, as long as I've known him as a councillor, for recognition of care leavers, was a strong supporter of this. The only queries came about the delegated authority for minor future statutory updates, which came originally from Councillor Pitt. Councillor Hassel asked me to define what a minor future change might be, and I couldn't easily do that in the comment. And there was some concern of ONS about this kind of delegated authority. Now, I've taken 20, 30 papers through ONS with these kind of delegated authority requests in them, and they've never caused problems before. But at this stage in the council, when we don't know what the political future of the council is, I think there was some nervousness about cross-party nervousness about what a future portfolio holder might do with that authority. I think we came to a compromise by saying that any delegated changes would be communicated to the chairs of ONS, and obviously would be done in discussion with the relevant officer, who's John Taylor currently. But I do understand those concerns, and having sat today through a county council meeting where I saw members an amendment to the county council budget from a political party not represented here, which tried to raid poverty funds for council tax reduction purposes, I can understand those concerns. Now, I think the safeguardings in place are enough, but I wanted to say I did hear those concerns and I do share some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Thank you for bringing this forward this evening. Do we have any comments or questions? Again, I know that lots of you were overview and scrutiny and you've been working quite closely with this policy. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, but briefly, Chair, this is a valuable legal change made nationally. I think it's right and proper to challenge councils to move on this swiftly, and the fact that we were able to implement it immediately without waiting for the policy review process so effectively is a testament, I think, to how the team here works. So really pleased to see this before us, and I won't delay us anymore. I look forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. If there are no other comments, then I'm going to go to the recommendations, unless Councillor Ferguson is about to... okay, just checking he wasn't going to indicate he wanted to come back in. So we have them on page 252. So the recommendations are, there are two. There's an approve the amendments as set out in Appendix 1, and the second is to give that delegated authority that we've already talked about in the presentation. Councillor Ferguson, are you happy to propose this? And Councillor Davenport-Ray is happy to second. Can I have a vote, a recorded vote, I remember this time, for those in favour, please? I don't mean a recorded vote, I mean a vote using the clever device that we have in front of us. Right. Otherwise, my monitoring officer will think that I'm asking for something completely different. We have voted, thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. I look forward to seeing that coming through in due process. That moves us on then to item 6, which is the Fleet Renewal and Infrastructure Improvement Strategy. And Councillor Kerr, I think this is you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really important strategy. It really matters. In 2023, HDC declared a climate and ecological emergency, and we are now committed to net zero emissions by 2040. Currently, our fleet account for 36% of the council's carbon footprint, so we're going to have to move on this. The national legislation also requires the phase out of petrol, diesel and non-zero emission vehicles. So this policy aligns with our corporate plan 23 to 28, the climate strategy and the building energy strategy. We also have government deadlines that we have to meet. 2030 is the end of new petrol, diesel cars and vans. 2035, all new cars and vans and HGVs under 26 tonne must be zero emissions. And by 2040, all new HGVs must be zero emissions. So this isn't an option, we have to act. So our strategic approach, we've developed it with the Energy Saving Trust. It is a phased, flexible transition to managing costs, risk and technological change. It builds on our existing progress, which includes the HVO fuel. The primary focus is on infrastructure readiness, not immediate vehicle replacement. And this is key. This is what will make the difference and has made the difference for us. We're working on a phased delivery model. Phase 1 is 2025 to 28, which is the upgrading of the depot power supply, installing scalable modular charging infrastructure, and vehicle changes only when there's a strong business case. Phase 2, which is 28 to 31, is accelerated rollout of zero emission vehicles, annual reviews to respond to the market, financial and legislative changes. And finally, phase 3 is 2031 onwards to complete transition to a full net zero fleet with ongoing reviews to ensure the best value and resilience. What we're looking for is an infrastructure investment of approximately £600,000 of capital investment. That will enable a grid upgrade to 800 to 850 kVA, future-proofing the cabling and charging points, and creating a long-term asset value for the depot. This will keep our assets valuable regardless of local government reorganisation, so that depot is future-proofed and can be used for anybody. The benefits of this is to reduce the carbon emissions significantly. It ensures compliance with our national legislation, and that's not an option. Improves operational reliance and resilience, and enhances depot value and flexibility. It also supports future partnership and shared service opportunities. So it's actually really key. And what's wonderful about this policy, it has flexibility. When it was presented to overview and scrutiny, the biggest concerns they had was the changing in legislation and also the changing in technology. But I actually think the policy covers that with the phased the phasing of it and also the flexibility that we've built into it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kerr. Any questions or comments other than I'm going to say from the chair? Really excited and really pleased that we're in this place, but I don't want to see anybody else's thunder. Councillor Ferguson.
So I read this paper tonight. I also watched the ONS meeting, and I think it's a really excellent, pragmatic solution to our position on, solving the climate emergency. I have this strange dual personality as I design engines by the daytime and I'm a Green Party councillor in the evening. But those two things aren't contradictory because, there isn't a future to this climate crisis. It doesn't involve engines of some size, some sort. And trying to work out what that looks like in the future is something that confuses everybody. So this solution is completely pragmatic. It's future-proof. It allows us to change as technology changes. I did get a bit frustrating during OS meeting, which I watched online, with some councillors suggesting we should just electrify everything. I think 3 years ago, Councillor Davenport-Rowe and I had a fun afternoon riding around on electric refuse wagons, which were great and they're fantastic, but not a good solution for the kind of rural nature of our district. So I think this is absolutely brilliant. It's a really well considered piece of work, and I think it sets us up perfectly to do. We already have. We've been working on this, for years, but I think we're very well set up to solve this problem internally. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. As Councillor Ferguson underlines, it might at one level feel sort of easy and satisfying to do away with our current fleet and tell ourselves and others that we've replaced them with something more environmentally friendly, but actually considering the holistic costs of that and embedding carbon and so on in losing perfectly good functional vehicles as well, that would be missing the broader impacts. I think what we've got set out here allows us to do this in an overall optimum way rather than just focusing on sort of headlines, and I'm very pleased to support it as a basis for us to move forward towards our journey to decarbonise the council.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. From the chair, then, I'm going to say that I think I'm at an HVO session this week, which is fantastic. This is tomorrow, I'm being reminded. So yes, not this week. I need to turn up in the right place tomorrow. But what's really exciting about this is about that fact that, we will be in a really good place, given that the world is moving quite fast in some of the technology, and actually the fact that we are able to do this when we've got other organisations saying they can't do anything, I think it speaks volumes for the amazing work of our officers and our team leading on this. So I'm really pleased to see this here tonight. We've got a series of recommendations which are set out on page 261 and 262. I am not going to read them all because they are very long, as in it's long per section. I'm going to work on the principle that most of the public will be able to reference the document, but I am just going to remind you of the principles behind each one. So number one is to adopt the fleet decarbonisation strategy. Number two is to approve the phased delivery model and the implementation plan. Number three is to approve the enabling infrastructure capital investment of approximately 600,000 for the depot grid upgrade, trunking and cable installation. There's number four is to note, and number five is to delegate authority so that we can actually then deliver this. Can I have a proposal, which I presume is Councillor Kerr? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson. And can I have a vote? Not recorded, a vote on your tablet thing, all those in support. Thank you. No, you see, I've now confused the computer. The computer says no, and I don't have the ability to vote online.
We exhausted our free quotes.
No, it's ready. So please cast your vote, and we have cast our votes, and it is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Well done, councillors, and well done those online, because we are still working our way through a very hefty agenda, but we've made some fantastic decisions this evening. We move on to number 7, which is habitat banking, and I think Councillor Davenport-Ray, this is yours. I apologise, it's Councillor Kerr. Sorry, Councillor Kerr, not paying enough attention.
That's okay. Back to me again. So this report looks to approve the creation of habitat banks on suitable council-owned or managed sites to generate biodiversity net gain units. Habitat banks will help Huntingdonshire District Council meet its legal duties under the Environment Act 2021, and it will also keep investment within the district and improve the quality of parks and open spaces for our residents. The proposal will be delivered in 2 phases. Phase 1 is already underway, using £49,416 from the underspend of the CPCA funded Biodiversity for All project to pilot habitat banking on the 3 sites. This funding covers surveys, habitat management and monitoring plans, and the initial habitat creation works. In phase 2, we're looking to build on phase 1 using a £220,000 capital bid, which has been submitted as part of the 2026-27 medium-term financial strategy to Habitat Bank's 3 additional council-owned or leased sites, and to fund habitat creation across all 6 sites. This report seeks to approve to proceed with phase 2, subject to the separate approval of the required capital funding through the council's budget process. The Bio for All project has identified 6 potential sites. Phase 1 sites were Barford Road in St Neots, Huntingdon Riverside and St Neots Riverside. In phase 2, the potential sites are Spring Common, Berman Park and Priory Park. Our financial modelling shows a potential net income of 2.78 million over 30 years. That's 1.96 million from phase 1 and 818,000 from phase 2. After allowing for management, staffing and maintenance costs, this could deliver a positive contribution of 1.74 million over the same period, depending on the market conditions and habitat quality. The proposals support the Council's Corporate Plan 2023 to 28, the Climate Strategy and Huntingdonshire Future Strategy and Local Nature Recovery Strategy that provides financially sustainable, nature-based way to improve biodiversity, climate resilience and community well-being. The report also sets out the Council's approach to habitat banking and confirms that officers have the authority needed to deliver the project subject to the necessary financial approvals. If we agree to continue with this developing habitat banking, it will make HDC one of the first councils in the country to currently do this. This gives us a significant advantage as we'll be able to offer something for which there is a very strong, growing demand. I believe it could be as successful as our HVO projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Does anybody have any questions or comments they wish to make? It's a fairly straightforward paper, but Councillor Davenport-Ray, seeing as I nearly gave this paper to you in the first place, I do apologise, Councillor Kerr.
I'm really happy that our council is moving in this direction and starting on this excellent piece of work. For perspective, if developers are building something and they aren't able on site to provide the biodiversity net gain, they have to find somewhere else in order to deliver it. And if we don't provide it, then someone else will. And someone else will probably do that at a profit rather than a public body taking on this task. And it also helps us ensure that the biodiversity gains happens in Huntingdonshire for planning applications that are approved in Huntingdonshire. So I'm really happy that we're hopefully tonight adopting this progress.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davenport-Ray. That sounded like a bit of a bid for option E. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. Had to get that in again. Councillor Ferguson.
So when I was on County Council for 4 years on the Environment and Green Investment Committee, we talked a lot about this. And like carbon offsetting, the issue with these programmes is always one of trust, isn't it? Is it, you know, it works as long as you can trust institutions who are doing the offsetting, or biodiversity net gain in this case. And so I think it's absolutely right that councils, and I know people in general don't trust politics anymore, but councils are the best places to happen because of the local focus and because we can be trusted to do it. And, you know, it's not only that a commercial company will take a profit, you know, there are schemes with the carbon offsetting where commercial companies are selling the same carbon offsets 3 or 4 times and nobody's checking on them. And our you know, position or our reputation for being scrutinised and being open and accountable, I think helps that. And so I think this is a great paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case then, we have a large number of recommendations again this evening. So they can be found on page 318 and 319. So I'm going to remind people before we move to the recommendations in terms of a proposer and a seconder. So A is to update the council on the Bio4All programme and showcase the partnership work. B is to acknowledge the environmental, social and economic benefits of habitat banking across Huntingdonshire. C is to seek approval for the principle of and approach outlined to phased establishment of habitat banks. D is to note, so we will note that. E is to seek approval on the approach, governance process and timeline for the full implementation across the district by April 2026. And F is to ensure appropriate delegations are in place. Can I have a proposer, please? I'm looking at Councillor Kerr. Thank you very much. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Davenport-Ray. Can you use your voting pad when it is then available? And the vote has been taken and it's unanimous again. Thank you very much, Cabinet. Thank you very much, Councillor Kerr. I really look forward to seeing the fruition of that coming through. That's brilliant news. We now have item 8, which is the 2025-26 Finance Performance Report. And there are some recommendations, but I'm going to hand back to Councillor Mickleborough.
So the report in front of us sets out the forecast outturn for the financial year 25-26 for both revenue and capital at the end of Q3. To run through the key highlights, the current net revenue budget for 25-26 is £26.772 million. The original budget was 26.464 million, plus brought forward budgets of £308,000. The forecast net expenditure for 25-26 is 27.373 million, less contributions from reserves of 2.627 million, which gives us a forecast underspend of 2.026 million. I'm sure that the question would arise with people of why is there a contribution from reserves of 2.6 million when we've talked about we're not needing to use reserves in order to make sure that our budget's balanced. Because the way budgets work, if you have a surplus in a previous year, you put that surplus into an earmarked reserve, and then in the following year you spend from that earmarked reserve. That is it seems a slightly strange way of doing things, but I suppose the best way to compare that might be that if you saved for your holiday last year, you put it into your savings account, you take it back out of your savings account and you put it into your current account in order to pay the bill for your holiday this year. Thinking through the fact that we're actually finding ourselves in a good, strong financial position for this year, it's worth running through where those underspends and actually some overspends have come from. So the key underspends in the revenue side of things, again, remember that revenue is like your operational budget. It's your day-to-day, week-to-week spending, where your capital budget will be items that you're spending larger purchases of big machinery. We've talked this evening about engines and fleets. Those will be things that you buy that will last you very many years, which goes into capital. Building new market squares, for example, is a capital expenditure, whereas revenue might be things like toilet rolls or stationery or items that you would use within the financial year or more immediately. So revenue underspends. From the head of planning, there's an underspend of £1.1 million, which is a result of additional income from planning performance agreements, planning fees and grant income, although this is offset by additional expenditure on agency staff and the Ukraine support scheme. There is also some saving from current vacant staffing posts, and there's also lower expenditure on empty homes. Head of Environmental Services reports an underspend of £800,000, mostly due to a surprise increase in income from recycling credits, but also through increased income received from the garden waste subscription service, bulky waste collections, street cleansing and grounds maintenance work. That is offset slightly by an increased cost of agency staff, vehicle hire, weekend working and riverbanks work. Again, it's worth pointing out that if you have increased income coming in because your services are in demand, you need to offset that by paying the staff who are performing those a higher amount. Head of Finance reports an underspend of £1.5 million, mostly because investment income is above budget because interest rates have remained higher for longer than expected. There is also a reduction in the minimum revenue provision as a result of the work in the capital programme being pushed into next year. I spoke earlier about how MRP, or minimum revenue provision, is a little bit like depreciation. You don't spend the capital budget by purchasing an asset. You do not have minimum revenue provision to make or depreciation to pay in a commercial sense. Customer Change Director has an underspend of £400,000 as a result of some additional housing benefit subsidy, as well as some cost savings from efficiencies. On the revenue overspend side of things, Chief Executive Officer has an overspend of £400,000 as a result of some of the costs relating to pay bargaining and staff interim cover. We have a overspend of £100,000 from the Head of Economy, Regeneration and Housing as a result of lift repairs at the multi-storey car park, and a slight reduction in car park income, although this has been offset by some savings in business rates on the car parks and some of our civil parking enforcement costs being lower than expected. Head of Property and Facilities has an overspend of £800,000 as a result of reduced rental income due to vacant properties, and also some increased costs coming through from some IT equipment costs. That has been offset by reduced costs through the use of fewer consultants, lower business rates charges and some lower utilities bills. In addition, we have the Head of Democratic Services and the Monitoring Officer, overspend of £300,000 as a result of some new Head of Service posts and some staff training. And then finally, the Head of Communications has a small overspend of £100,000 as a result of some of the work around staff on-call costs being required and local government review work. There are some changes to the capital forecast. The approved capital programme for the year was 14.527 million, which included rephasings from last year of 2.7 million. At the year end, a total of 15.86 million was rephased. So the current total budget is 27.687 million. The forecast for the year ahead is 21.1 million, which is an underspend of 6.57 million, which is likely to rephase into next year. The rest of the report is in front of you. So if there are any questions, please do make them known.
Thank you, Councillor Mickleborough, and thank you for the very detailed analysis that you've provided about overspends, underspends, and what has caused those. I think that's really a level of detail that hopefully gives people that confidence around the specifics, because sometimes when you look at a whole spreadsheet with numbers going up and down, it's the narrative behind it. I'm sure there are people who are going to be very pleased about the lifts at the car park. I noticed that's on social media quite a lot, so that's certainly a highlight. Any particular comments? Councillor Ferguson.
So just with regard to the overspend on comms, which might seem like a large amount of money, but at County Council today, it was pointed out that the County Council has 21 full-time comms employees. Considering what we managed to do with how many do we have, 2-3 people working on comms, compared to, I think, any other council in the region, especially with regard to LGR, that overspend would seem to me to be very well spent. I think we punch well above our weight, and yeah, I think that's money well spent.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I just took advice. Some of that overspend also was, you'll remember we had quite a significant national incident that happened in our area. Nothing to do with us, but it happened to arrive in Huntingdonshire. And some of that overspend was actually our staff who brilliantly rallied and made sure that we were on call, available to deal with that kind of incident, which was certainly not something we were expecting to need to do. And I hope we never need to do it again. But what a brilliant team, because they just made sure that we had the right information for the public that we needed. And that's why sometimes you get an unexpected expenditure with such a tiny team. So thank you. Councillor Wakeford and then Councillor Sanders.
Not a major line in the grand scheme of things in this budget, Chair, but I thought I'd note my favourite line in the financial quarterly report was the noting of underspend on rent for the market in St Neots on account of the fact that we now own the charter and Wendy Fairs have moved on, and so we are now operating that ourselves. So that does represent a small revenue saving, but rather larger benefits that we've talked about elsewhere that I won't delay us tonight, but it made me smile.
Thank you for highlighting that, and I will dwell on it just to say, that allows us now to make sure that Market Square is thriving with the regular market and meets the needs and ambitions of the local community, which I think is incredibly welcome. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask a question on 4.2 CIS investments. Looks like we're about £763,000 under what we had predicted or what was in the budget. I think in your earlier report, Councillor Mickleborough, it was mentioned in the report that it's quite a tough time in the property market at the moment. Is that the reason for that sort of gap, or are there other factors in there?
Yes, we are on the commercial investment strategy side of things. I think it's fair to say the entire market is still readjusting after the change that COVID has brought. So I think you've seen an increase in people working from home. I think you've seen a reduction in demand for larger commercial properties. People are looking at smaller things that are more sort of regional hubs rather than big central locations. And our portfolio has a little bit of a collection in there of items that have been hit quite hard by that, as well as retail, which has suffered. We do have there is a bright star in amongst that little list of properties that we own, however, that has gone the other way, and that's keeping things looking respectable. I did mention earlier that over the course of the last four years, the only thing that we haven't really moved forward is the commercial investment strategy properties. But what you've got to do is take that they've been made, or the investments have been made with that view of a 20-25 year horizon, not a 2.5 year horizon, and we've done our best as we can with them in difficult circumstances. We've produced a new commercial investment strategy as well, which is a big improvement on what came before, and gives us a little bit more flexibility, although our ability to execute it is probably going to be limited by local government reform. or reorganisation rather.
Thank you, Councillor McElburn. Good question, Councillor Sanderson. Thank you. Unless there are any more questions or comments, on page, I've moved too far ahead. The recommendations were set out on page 333, and they were for you to consider and comment, which I think you've done duty to. So in which case, thank you very much. I'm going to move us on to the One Leisure Independent Review update. Now, I notice that we have our officers with us who've been waiting patiently. Are you going to come and join us around the table, gentlemen? You, presuming that you might have been expecting that. We've got Greg and Lee coming to sit with us. Councillor Howell isn't able to be with us this evening, but our officer team are, and I'm really pleased to receive this report this evening. Who's going to start us off? Councillor Kerr is going to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In September 2023, the Council commissioned First Point to undertake an independent review of the One Leisure long-term operating model and the in-house leisure service. The review considered short-term operating models 2 to 3 years, staffing, built facilities and play pitch strategies, and then the medium-term 3 to 5 year and the long-term 5+ year operating models. The independent review was presented to and approved by Cabinet in March 24. It was concluded that a transformed in-house option is the recommended approach for the short term. This should allow sufficient time to optimise the service before considering medium and long-term delivery options. The review also set out a number of recommendations for One Leisure, and the Council to consider detailed on page 50 to 51 of the independent review. As agreed by Cabinet in March 24, the Head of Leisure, Health and Environment provided a 12-month update to Overview and Scrutiny Committees in Cabinet in July 2025. This update identified 7 further actions for consideration set out in section 4.4. The purpose of this report is to update the Council on the progress and the focus solely on these 7 actions identified in the July 2025 12-monthly update. So I will hand over to the gentleman who might go through some of them. They've been clearly set out in the report.
Thank you.
Some slides. I won't go over the exec summary as Councillor Kerr's kindly given an overview there of what we're here for this evening. Again, the seven additional items is to inform members of the progress, is to provide councillors an opportunity to comment, consider and respond to the progress following that presentation in July 25, and also one of the items on the list is to gain approval for the newly created One Leisure Vision Customer Charter and the structure for the One Leisure 3-year business plan in light of LGR. They're the 7 items, again detailed within the report. I'm not going to go through each item. You've got sight of those. I will draw your attention, as mentioned, to finalise and gain number 5, to finalise and gain approval for the One Leisure Design Principles, Vision and Customer Charter. This is the progress on each of the action and items. So the commissioning of the independent review for One Leisure's readiness for LGR, looking at market review of the providers across Cambridgeshire, and outlining the risks and recommendations for One Leisure. The report was commissioned to start in November last year, and it will be completed in March of this year. That we'll come back to the findings and present to members on that. It's to complete the outstanding feasibility studies for One Leisure to RIBA Stage 1, so that's to get us ready again, the stock of other leisure centres outside of the Huntingdon Sport and Health Hub development. So it's to provide opportunities again for HTC to consider. That work was initiated in a walk around with consultants in November, and will be presented back in March again of this year. It's to gain full approval of the Huntingdon Sport and Health Hub. I know that's come through separately, and that was gained. RIBA Stage 2 was approved in October of last year. Full planning application to be approved in February, and hopefully approval of the budget full council in February 26. To secure the partnership arrangements for the NHS and ICB to work from within the Huntingdon Sport and Health Hub. Ongoing discussions and heads of terms are being aimed to be complete by March, and I know Greg's leading on the negotiations there. Working with colleagues to develop the decarbonisation plans, that will be picked up as part of the Huntingdon Sport and Health Hub development, and within the REBA Stage 1 feasibilities that will look at each of the centres that will take into consideration the decarbonisation plans. The mobilisation and reopening of Sawtry, we're currently under an MOU and we're operating the facility on behalf of the Trust. Works underway for the plant reinstatement. It's all on track, and we're aiming to have that work completed by the middle of March for an early spring opening. That once we're confident that there are nothing to come in left field, we'll put a public announcement and announce a date that we're due to open. As mentioned, the finalising gain approval of the One Leisure design principles and customer charter. Staff engagement helped develop these principles, 2 working groups, and we're seeking approval this evening to move on launching those for April 2026. As mentioned, staff working group, 2 sessions in March and October, and then the progress of those were presented to the below stakeholders on the dates set out on the slide, and we're here this evening, obviously on the 10th of February, to look at that. The principles to consider, again, I won't go through item line by line, but you can see some of the things that formulated the charter, the principles that we used to feed into what we think it should look like for our customers, and that is the proposal we're putting forward, the we wills that underpin our customer charter commitment. I'll leave that up for a few moments just to familiarise yourselves with. And then we derived and developed a One Leisure vision statement, which deliver high quality and sustainable customer-led affordable services and facilities for the local community. We felt that reflects what we aim to do and underpins our values. On top of that, we looked at a 3-year business plan, again, run up to LGR, and looking at the principles of the things that we need to consider and include within that. And these are the frameworks for the One Leisure business plan. If there's anything in there that you think is missing or should be included, or you'd like to see considered for that business plan, then I can happily pick that up at the end, which we are duly at. So I will take any questions if anyone has any. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much. I have a feeling there might be some well, not necessarily questions, but certainly some comments. Would anybody? Nobody's got a hand up. I'm going to kick off though. I just wanted to give some feedback. So we've already got do, enable and influence. I love can do and fix it. That's brilliant. I don't know quite who generated that. I suspect it was a member of staff or a couple of members of staff, because I know it came from your engagement work. But I think that speaks volumes about how we work. So I really, really like that. I'm going to have it written somewhere and put it up in my office, because I really like that. Can do and fix it. Really delighted about Sawtry Pool. That's really, really incredibly welcome. And I noticed that today I got a notification from the Hunt Post saying about the planning application coming through for the hub in Huntingdon. So these are all very topical things that are really important and really important to our communities as well as to us as an administration. Does anybody have any comments or anything? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent presentation, Lee. Thank you very much. Just a quick question from me, as you'd expect. This is on page 389, and it mentions the partnership arrangement with NHS ICB for the Huntingdon Sport and Health Hub. And you're looking to try and complete that by next month. Are you on course for that, do you think, and are things going smoothly?
Thank you for the question. So we've had a number of meetings with the NHS now, the Integrated Care Board, for the last 12 months. So initially the discussion centred around a long-term lease. but we're now moving towards looking at whether we move away from a long-term lease, or they move away from a long-term lease around the financial management and the length of that contract and whether it's a license to occupy. We're actually meeting them tomorrow with the NHS England, to look at the powers they have around the funding or the longer term funding for that arrangement. So we do hope that something will happen over the next couple of months, and we're working with a number of other stakeholders to make the legal the legalities, or conclude the legalities, I should say, with the town council and with the tennis club and with other stakeholders as well. So we're working over the next couple of months to have everything done. So subject to planning and the finance being approved, we can then move forward with the wider project.
Fantastic. You've given us so much to think about. Really, really fantastic amount of work done. And when I think about the journey we've been on, we've covered a lot of ground in this administration, and you've put us from where we started to where we are now is unrecognisable in a really, really positive way. So thank you very, very much. We have some recommendations before us tonight, Cabinet, which I hope we will approve. The one that bemused me most is that we're going to approve your vision, your customer charter. I think you've already done that because it's come from the staff, but we will. That's one of the recommendations. So let me just remind everybody, these are set out on page 386. So we have a recommendation to agree and approve all the outstanding actions, and a recommendation to acknowledge and accept the 7 new actions as set out, to accept and or approve the completion or ongoing nature of the 7 actions identified in the transformation progress report, to approve that One Leisure vision, customer charter and new structure. I've told you I'm already adopting it, but we'll see what everybody else says. And number 5 is to delegate. It's been a long day. To delegate authority to the head of leisure, health and environment. No, we're not deleting you at all. We're delegating. I was just checking everybody else was awake. So those are the recommendations before you, Cabinet. In the honoured fashion, please press your button when it appears. Oh, a proposer and a seconder. You see, look, I'm getting... Thank you very much. Councillor Kerr proposing, Councillor Stardalson seconding. And we've got there, and it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we made you wait a long time for that, but thank you very much. And please pass our thanks on to your teams that I know have worked tirelessly with you, but thanks for your hard work. What a fantastic report to be able to look at, and what a journey. Thank you. I was going to say, yes, the Chief Executive said we almost want to clap you. Look, I'm going to clap you. We're going to clap you. Well done. Thank you very much. Seriously, some fantastic work there, and please do pass on our thanks. Cabinet, bear with us. The last 2 items. Now, I'm going to present these this evening. They're not last because they're of least importance. They are last just because that's the way they fell on the agenda for this evening. But I'm going to talk you through the Corporate Peer Challenge. And it's my real pleasure to present this to you. It's on page 411, and I'm just going to move my cursor till I get to the right page in my report. So this is the Corporate Peer Challenge that you will have been on the journey with us now for some weeks and months. We have been reporting back regularly through our overview and scrutiny, so that they were aware of where we were and the performance that we had in fact been achieving. You now can see before you that we've got a report on the progress made in Q3. And noting that you've got formal recommendations and suggestions that have all now been fully met and transitioned into business as usual. So that's particularly important, because one of the challenges we always have is we are a learning organisation. So when we invited the Peer Challenge to come and work with us, they worked with us to identify our strengths and our weaknesses, areas for development, areas for ongoing improvement, and also a chance to recognise the things we were doing really, really well. all of that is part of our commitment to ongoing learning. And so when you develop a delivery plan, it doesn't mean that when you get to the end of the plan, we all put our feet up and the job is done and you never go and look at it ever again. It means it transitions into business as usual. It means those discrete parts of the project we have delivered, and we will continue on that improvement journey, looking time and time again at not only what have we delivered so far, but what we continue to deliver into the future. However, the whole purpose of a corporate peer review is to start the process, to develop a delivery plan, to deliver that plan, and then to close out that particular phase. And that's where we are this evening. So you'll see on page 414 that of all of the things that we said we needed to do, all of them are green and fully met. You will now see then that we are transitioning any residual work into our business as usual, which is the point of a peer review. So in other words, it doesn't become a project in its own right, it just becomes part of your day-to-day working. And we will do that going forward. This allows us then to go back to our peers to feedback and report on the progress that we have made, so that they can equally see what we've taken on board and how we've implemented it, which I know they will, I'm sure, be as pleased about as we have been, because they were very complimentary when they came to see us, and they shared some very thoughtful reflections that underpinned the programme that we've been working to. So you have before you two recommendations. So the first is to review and comment on the progress. So I'll take comments in just a moment. And then if you're content, that we would then confirm that the executive leader, which is myself, and the chief exec would then write to the Local Government Association informing them of the completion of the formal plan being delivered in full. So I'm going to pause there for any questions or comments. Number of occasions, because it's been back before us as we worked our way through it, but you may want to do some reflections on that process just before we then go to an agreement on the recommendations. Are there any questions or comments anybody would like to make? Everybody's got to that point in the evening where they've seen it lots of times. Councillor Harvey and Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. I came into Cabinet 2 years into this, having sat on Corporate Governance Committee, and there was quite a few recommendations that needed to be looked at and a lot of work to be done on governance. And I'm really, really pleased that actually we're in a much better place now as a result of this Corporate Peer Challenge. And really, really pleased that not only have we got those recommendations in place, we're also thinking about the future. So I'm really pleased that we've dealt with all that.
Thank you. I'd agree with you. It's good news. Councillor Kerr.
I was just going to echo that, but in relation to the overview and scrutiny panel. So I can't talk for the CAS panel, but certainly the panel I used to chair, it made a massive difference. People got heard and changes have been made, and they're far more involved and hands-on than they have ever been. And certainly sitting in on the panels when I've been there, it's very exciting what's been going on there. So really well done. It's made a big difference.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Any other comments? No, in which case then I just need to find the correct page, because I managed to move my cursor through the report a little quicker than I'd intended. Right, the recommendations then are on page 412. So the first recommendation is to review and comment on the progress, which you've done. And then the second is to confirm the action for the executive leader and the chief executive officer to write to the Local Government Association, informing them of the completion of the formal Corporate Peer Challenge action plan and to provide the necessary evidence to support this position. I'm happy to propose it from the chair. Can I have a second? Councillor Harvey, thank you very much. Can you use your buttons, please, to vote? Thank you. I was just saying, I told you I'd get there eventually. It's only taken me all evening, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Which moves us then on to the final item. I think we might have saved the best till last, because this is really important. This is our corporate plan refresh. Now, we've talked a lot about local government reorganisation, and yes, I'm going to mention option E again, so those at home can tick it off on there. How many times did she mention it in this meeting list? what's really important is as we go forward that we make sure that we have a really good plan for our staff to work to as we transition through this May's election period and to the administration that will follow in May. Now, obviously, we're all biased and we'd all like to be back round this table again, but it will be a new administration, whether it's those of us who are currently serving in any of the political groups and non-political groups, or whether it's an entirely new cohort of 52 councillors who've never been here before. It will be a brand new administration, and making sure that you have a corporate plan for that administration to come in and a plan that our staff can work to through that transition is absolutely crucial. And as we go through local government reorganisation, it's probably never been more important, because we need to keep business as usual moving while we also twin track the fact that we will be moving to a new organisation, and in the second year of that administration there will be a shadow authority coming into being. So with that in mind, the proposal that we talked through with our staff colleagues was to create a corporate plan refresh, but a very light refresh, because it needs to get through the next 2 years. It needs to be there and able for a new administration to come in and to own that plan. I was asked by Councillor Martin whether there was anything in the plan that a new incoming administration could not change, and the answer is no, they could change it all. Although I suspect that officer capacity may well be a little stretched if we're doing that and local government reorganisation. But the idea is really to give our staff some certainty, because most of the corporate plan is in fact delivering all of the day-to-day tasks, all of those objectives. Importantly, we looked at the proposals around the key performance indicators. And I'm really pleased to see that we have been responding and listening, particularly when we're asked about why some are kept as they are, why some change, and whether we're in fact being challenging enough. So in Appendix D, you'll see there are some proposed tweaks to the performance measures. I'm going to describe them as tweaks. 34 out of the 35 are remaining in place. And I'm really pleased to report that the one that in fact we're not keeping is the one about the planning backlog, because after 3 years of real due diligence from our staff, we've managed to reduce it by 92% of the backlog we inherited, down to a much smaller number of applications we are still working through. And long may that continue, but that was a hard-won battle by staff. And don't forget, some of those accrued on the back of COVID. So, you know, there was a very good reason why we were in that position. But I'm really pleased that that is one that's going to change. We are ever ambitious as both a cabinet and as an administration. That's 52 councillors, and we have in fact stretched targets on six of them, which I'm sure the overview and scrutiny members will be pleased about, because they're forever challenged to make sure that if we're hitting green, can we do any better? Can we stretch ourselves even more? So we have before you a detailed report. I'm not going to go through any further of the detail, but I am just going to pick up some of the comments from overview and scrutiny, because I do have some updates and we will make sure these go back direct to panel. Overview and scrutiny, Councillor Jennings drew attention to the KPIs, the key performance indicator, for the number of attendances at active lifestyle events, and asked for further clarity regarding the change of circumstances regarding contracts which will affect targets for next year. So I can report that the active lifestyle team bids on contracts and funding every year. And one of our long-standing contracts has decided to go in a different direction for 2026-27, which means that we will then have a reduction in the number of attendances compared to the previous 3 financial years. So that explains why there is that change. That 6.3 KPIs 12, 13 and 14 relating to planning were raised, and the panel wondered why they had not been raised for the coming year, as targets had been exceeded this year. The performance team will take this back and explore possible changes. However, it must be noted that we are still 5 to 10% above the national average on our performance, and it's comparable to our SIP for neighbours. The planning improvements programme is currently underway, so there is a significant amount of change already taking place in that service. So hopefully that reassures councillors who ask that question that we do take seriously the ongoing commitment to continuous improvement. At 6.4, Councillor Jennings asked why the number of business engagements made by the Economic Development team was set to be less for KPI 16. It must be said that our economic development team had a phenomenal year, and therefore it's going to be very hard to replicate that performance. However, until we set a budget, we suspect that at the moment we can't confirm attendances at some of the key things that we would be doing in the coming year. So we will need to wait for the budget before we can then actually have some certainty. But ongoing, we are keen to ensure that the contacts we do make are of very high quality, and we don't want to dilute that with lots of new engagements. So it's the real balance between number of engagements versus quality of engagements, and the team continue to work really well at making sure we get that balance right. It was noted about our sample of clean areas, and thank you to the Overview and Scrutiny for praising us for having achieved a more challenging target. That's all obviously down to our wonderful teams on the ground. At 6.6, the panel wondered why the implementation of the hybrid working policy would affect short-term staff sickness. Now, I remember answering this on the evening, but the change was informed by a report from the CIPD, which is the HR body, who found that hybrid working does increase sickness. At least that's what they find as a national body. However, we remain committed to taking action to mitigate this as HDC. It must be also noted that this increase is in line with a national trend in both public and private sectors, and that our absence remains below the national average. And I remember explaining on the night that we are working really hard because hybrid working is something that many of our staff do really well at. And trying to find the balance to make it work really effectively and equally fairly for everybody is a challenge that, like all employers, we are grappling with and we are actively working with to get the best for staff and to be the best employer that we can be. 6.7, Councillor Gardner raised concerns relating to KPI 18, which was the North Huntingdon Growth Cluster. It was noted that the report mentioned about working with developers but didn't include anything about working with communities, and he felt it was a missed opportunity and urged us to review this. The performance team are going to take that away and reword it. I don't think there was any intention to miss out communities. It was just the wording didn't specifically mention them. So we will in fact take that away because that is our commitment. 6.8, members asked if there was anything in the business plan that couldn't be amended by the new administration. I've already covered that, and the answer is no, it is still flexible. They can make changes as they see fit. 6.9 was the KPI relating, was asked if we would have a KPI created for the empty home strategy and the food waste collection service. So we're taking that back to the teams to look at what might be appropriate to add in alongside the work that's already being done. And that will come back through the overview and scrutiny pipeline of work. And then the last two items, the panel wondered if rough sleepers were part of the homelessness KPI. No, they aren't currently included. At the panel's request, we are exploring working this into a new KPI. And again, that'll come back through to overview and scrutiny. And following the discussion, the panel were informed that the comments would be added to the Cabinet report, which you have in fact had here this evening. So I hope that's answered all the questions, but we will go back directly to the very good questions that Overview and Scrutiny did pose on the evening. I'm going to pause there and ask if anybody has any comments or questions they wish to raise before I take us through to the recommendations. No, and you have seen this a number of times and you are all very familiar with it. So on page 459. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wakeford. Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't quick enough. I just thought I'd reflect briefly. I think the question is about KPI 18, the Huntingdon North Growth Cluster. I think the action there was the sort of substantive point, and the way we operate as a council is that, if you like, it goes without saying that, of course, doing development and engagement requires involvement of communities. But I think, spelling that out, and not least as it won't be us in this current form, at least if any of us, and if at all, post May, that is prudent for us to reflect on, sort of articulating that for successors' benefits.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford, and indeed that's entirely what the corporate plan is for. So actually making sure that it spells out actually what is really important, again, just so that it doesn't get lost. So thank you for drawing that out. If there are no other comments then, we have recommendations in two sets. So the first set is for us to recommend and the second set is then for us to recommend to council. So I'm going to put to you the first set. So Cabinet is recommended to A, endorse the refreshed corporate plan to council, and B, to endorse the key performance indicator change. If I propose that from the chair, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Can you hit the buttons, please? Thank you very much. So that's carried unanimously. And then the final cluster of recommendations on the same page is that we will take these forward to council as recommendations that in turn council approve the refreshed corporate plan and council approve the key performance indicators. Just for completeness, can we just have a vote that you are happy now for these to proceed? So I'm getting happy with the voting system now. Thank you very much. Cabinet, well done. That was a very, very detailed meeting. We've come to the conclusion. For those who've been watching us online, thank you very much for joining us. I apologise that you had a slight interruption during the evening. And for some of you, you will have gone back and watched it all on the recording. I hope that you found that interesting. We've covered a wide range of work. Again, can I just put on record our thanks to all of the staff, because actually an evening like this evening is a real reflection of just how hard our staff teams right across every aspect of our work are busy working. And that brings us full circle back to Councillor Davenport-Ray and the sort of the value of our staff that we talked about earlier, and Councillor Mickleborough when we talked about investing in our staff. So with that, I'm going to draw us to a close. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.